Welcome back, everyone. We have the distinct pleasure to welcome Indiana's 2nd District Congressman Rudy Yakym to our show this morning. He is on his One Big Beautiful Hoosier District tour, and we get to welcome him today to find out exactly how it's going. Good to see you, Rudy.
Great to see you, Tricia. Thanks for having me in.
Now, you are on your longest stretch being home, able to sleep in your own bed. What's that like?
You know, it's great to be home with Sally Ann and the kids. They started school yesterday. Sally Ann's back to teaching, and our middle child actually started high school yesterday.
Oh my gosh.
So it's a great time on the family front, a great time to be home.
And you're visiting on your big, beautiful district tour. So tell us how it's going.
We're traveling all 11 counties at least 3 times over this month, hearing directly from Hoosiers about the great impacts of the One Big Beautiful bill that we just passed. Everything from no tax on tips. Had lunch at Allie's Cafe yesterday and heard some of the great impacts of that. No tax on overtime. Toured Hoosier Racing Tire and a number of other great manufacturers here in Indiana's 2nd District, hearing about the effects of no tax on overtime. So just a number of great provisions in this bill that we're getting out and hearing from Hoosiers about.
Well, you picked these locations and you picked these businesses to visit, but I think a lot of your constituents would rather see you do a town hall or a debate, and yet you haven't done those. Why not?
Well, you know, we're focused on having productive conversations with Hoosiers. We actually have a number of Hoosiers who reached out and requested time with me directly. We're actually having a number of meetings today, one-on-one with Hoosiers who requested my time. And as we travel throughout our district, when we meet with some of these businesses, we'll actually go right onto a shop floor and hear directly from individual Hoosiers, totally unscripted, hearing directly from them on what's on their minds. We also have a number of Hoosiers who reach out to me directly, even through my website, with specific issues that they have. A lot of people don't know that my office handles about 2,000 individual cases per year for Hoosiers who have issues with our federal government, everything from Social Security to Medicare to Medicaid to veterans issues. We are very, very present within this district.
Well, and a lot of people that maybe, say you're not accessible, you say go to your website. Is that the best way to reach you?
That's one way to reach us. Another way to reach us would be you can call our office. We have an office in Mishawaka. We have an office in Rochester. You can call our number. You can also go to our website, sign up for our email newsletter that we send out every single week. We're very present on social media. But also, because I live here in this district, I didn't move my family to Washington, D.C. People see me all the time at the grocery store. They see me all the time at various restaurants. They see me out in and about the community. So you can accuse me of a lot of things. Not being accessible is certainly not on the list.
11 counties in your district, and there has been a call, Vice President Vance in the state recently, to ask Governor Braun to redistrict Indiana. Do you see, is that something that you support?
Well, for me, I mean, it's truly the honor of a lifetime to represent Indiana's 2nd District, the most manufacturing intense district in the entire country. I love the district that I represent, that is home for me. Those conversations, of course, are happening down in Indianapolis, and those conversations will happen between the governor and the state legislature. Whatever they decide, we'll figure out how to live with and deal with here. But for me, as I travel throughout Indiana's 2nd District, people are talking about the economy. They're talking about getting back to work. They're talking about growing their businesses. They're talking about expanding and hiring new people. So while those conversations are taking place in Indianapolis, that's what people are focused on up here in this district.
Well, let's talk about some of those discussions that Hoosiers have. The U.S. and China tariff truce has been extended, of course. That puts us closer to the holidays. And a lot of Hoosiers are wondering how this is going to affect the costs for Hoosiers as we get close to Christmas.
You know, what President Trump has been very clear on is that we need to negotiate fair and level playing fields for our manufacturers, for our farmers, for our agricultural interests. We can compete with anyone across the globe as long as we have a fair and level playing field. Of course, having such a manufacturing intense district, tariffs are also important for us. So we've been giving a lot of feedback to the administration, encouraging them to negotiate these trade deals quickly, but also negotiate fair and level playing field.
And that is one of the things, though, too, you touched on it, farm markets and also commodities for Indiana farmers and producers we don't even have a farm bill yet.
You know, we will have we have a farm bill that has been going through our agricultural committee. Would love to see that come on to the floor. We actually got in the farm bill the things that were important to our Hoosier farmers. As I've traveled throughout the district for the last 3 years, listening to our farmers, I actually had a shop talk yesterday with a number of farmers out on the west side of South Bend. We've given that feedback to the agricultural committee, and they've incorporated really about every Hoosier farming interest that we needed in the farm bill, we got. So I'd like to see it go to the floor.
Staying on the topic of ag, I want to ask about protections for farm workers, because we're talking, especially in the pork industry, that is something very important to the state of Indiana. I want to ask about protections for the guest worker program. Those are the H-2A, the year-round workers. What kind of protections can we have for those individuals?
You know, the H-2A program is a critical component to our farming community, as we have agricultural workers who come from all around the world to work right here in Indiana's 2nd District. Our farmers have indicated that it's a program that they'd like to see continue, and we certainly support that.
Good. And what about the topic of immigration reform? Would you agree that the use of the term Speedway Slammer and the use of the marketing of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway was in poor taste?
That sounds like a great, you got to have something that sticks, right? So it's pretty easy to have something that sticks there.
I know, but we're Hoosiers, and that's something we're very proud of.
What I think about is the order of priorities in terms of our immigration. Number one, under President Joe Biden, we had a wide open southern border. We literally had a point during the last administration where 1 out of every 100 people came across the southern border illegally in the last 12 months. 1 out of every 100 people in the country at one point in time. Priority 1 was to seal the border. The president has certainly done that. Priority 2 was to take, out of the 15 or so million people who are here illegally, roughly 1.5 million of them have committed crimes after they crossed the border illegally. So rounding up those people and having them deported is a huge priority for the president. I certainly support that priority. And then once those 2 priorities are accomplished, we'll go from there.
And I appreciate your response, but I asked the question about using the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, calling it Speedway Slammer. Is that in poor taste?
I don't think so. Why would it be? I mean, you know, you got to have a little fun with some of the marketing of this stuff. I mean, you know, these are real issues. These are big issues.
These are real lives, so we're having fun with real lives.
I got to tell you though, Tricia, the people that the president has been focused on rounding up are people who have committed felonies after they crossed this country. If you go and talk to the family of Laken Riley, who was murdered by an illegal alien who was caught in this country, and instead of being deported after he committed a crime, he was released into the country and then murdered Laken Riley.
We also hear about a Purdue student who is detained for 5 days, and her visa doesn't expire until December. I mean, these are some of these individuals who are innocent.
And what I've told Hoosiers is that if anyone has any trouble in this district who is here legally on a lawful status, if you have any problems, feel free to reach out to my office and we'll go to bat for you. But there are so many people, literally over 1.5 million people in this country, who have committed crimes after they crossed the border illegally. We've got to focus on those people, round them up, and deport them immediately.
And you're willing to help those individuals who are being detained that may have visas that are perfectly okay?
Absolutely. If someone has a problem who's here on a lawful status and you have an issue, give my office a call. We're here to help. We're here to support. There are so many people who are trying to actually come to this country legally and do it the right way. We help those people. We have a number of open cases working with those people to help them do it the right way.
A lot of concern this week. I want to turn the attention to Washington, D.C. and the use of our National Guard policing the streets. Is this a wise use of federal resources?
When you look at Washington, D.C., I mean, it is the president's right. It is the front door to this country. And Washington, D.C., from a crime perspective, is a total train wreck. It's an absolute disaster. When I go there, every member of Congress has to watch their back. You've got to be very concerned about your safety there. We even had one of my colleagues, he had an intern who was shot in Washington, D.C. I mean, this is no joke, and this is very real. And if the mayor of Washington, D.C. won't secure the city, the president will.
Does it concern you, though, that this amount of money is being spent on the National Guard policing for this amount of time?
How much is a life worth? How much is it worth to have a city that is safe? When people come to this country, the president talked about Washington, D.C. being like the front door of our country. And if your front door is dirty, what do you think the kitchen looks like? I think he's right about that. And so to have the nation's capital secure, I'll feel better, I'll feel safer when I return to Washington, D.C. after Labor Day.
We hear Democrats say that this is simply a distraction from the Epstein files and the calls to have those files released. What do you say about that, and do you support the release of the Epstein files?
Well, saving lives and securing our nation's capital is never a distraction. I mean, that's what should be done. At the same time, as it relates to the Epstein files, I've been very clear, and I have a public record on this, saying that the American people deserve accountability and transparency. And I've called for the files to be released, but I've also called for the victims to be protected. You can't just take the victims of Jeff Epstein and put their names out there, have their families go through this all over again. So I called for the victims to be protected, but I've also called for transparency and accountability.
Okay, having those Epstein files then released would be the accountability?
To me, that's a great step along the way in accountability. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what's inside the files. And so from my perspective, the first step in accountability is transparency. And you can't really have accountability until you have transparency.
Jobs and job security, a big part of your platform that you talk about. The Bureau of Labor Statistics has a new leader who is a known critic of the Bureau. Tell me, does this concern you at all for the accuracy and integrity of job numbers?
Well, when you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics and the lack of accuracy that we've had before, where they will publish reports and then months later come back and revise these reports, sometimes by hundreds of thousands of individual jobs, how do we not have accurate data up front? There has to be better ways of looking at our job numbers. There has to be better ways of getting accurate data on the initial report, not having to come back months later and do revision after revision after revision. So I support an overhaul of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics, as the president does, making sure that when we release our job numbers up front, we have accurate data on day one, not 60 to 90 days later.
You're on your one big beautiful tour, and you're touting a lot of the of what you call the benefits of the one big beautiful bill that the president was very successful in passing. You were running yourself on the whole idea that we would have you were very critical, I should say, of President Biden raising the national debt, and yet the president's so-called one big beautiful bill adds trillions to the deficit. How do you justify that?
Well, there's two things here. The federal government has really two big levers. One is taxes and the other one is spending. My belief is that the federal government, not only do we tax too much, but we also spend too much. In our one big beautiful bill, not only do we reduce taxes and cut taxes for working Hoosiers, what we also did is we actually cut spending. The most spending that's ever been cut prior to this bill is $400 billion. This bill cuts over $1 trillion of federal spending. So if we have an opportunity to cut taxes, trust the American people with their money and put more money in Hoosiers' pockets, while at the same time cutting spending, I'll take that vote every day.
Is there anything that you disagree with the president on? Anything he's said or done with his administration?
My general focus tends to be traveling Indiana's 2nd District, listening to Hoosiers, and then giving the feedback to the administration on where we think we can improve. And one area where we give constant feedback, you talked about tariffs earlier, giving constant feedback to the administration because it's just such a huge impact for our manufacturers, making sure that we're giving feedback to the administration saying we've got to negotiate these deals quickly and we have to negotiate fair and level playing fields for the United States so that our manufacturers and our producers of ag can compete globally.
Any personal messages, though, that the president sends to the country that makes you uncomfortable?
If you're not pushing the envelope a little bit, you're not leading. And if the goal in the United States shouldn't be to have our comfort, the goal should be to push the envelope, to get manufacturers back to work, to get people back to work, to get people investing in this country again, to get companies growing again. We have to grow our American economy at a rate that is much faster than what we've done over the last 4 years. Because you mentioned our national debt, and one of the things we have to do is grow fast so that we can have more revenue to the federal government. So if you're not pushing the envelope a little bit, you're probably not leading.
Is there any concern that you see right now with the way that the government is working and headed?
You know, for me, some of the biggest things that I see out of our federal government is that I'm actually very proud of is some of the reforms that are being made. You know, we've had, Washington, D.C. is hardwired to protect the status quo. It's hardwired that way. And what we've seen over many, many presidents for multiple decades is just an incredible amount of growth in our federal government. We see a bloated bureaucracy where someone tries to get something done, even something simple like a new permit to go build a new business or a new permit to build a new power transmission line. And it's so complicated, it's so opaque. And sometimes if you want to do something, you could take 10 years to get a permit for something only to get a no. And so to have a president that is mixing things up and saying, look, we're not going to think about things the same way we always have, I think it's great. Does it always make people comfortable? No. The goal shouldn't be for our comfort. The goal should be for our success and our forward momentum as a country.
I think a lot of Democrats might disagree and say having a calm and steady leader and one who is very strong and really rewards the idea of getting along and being collaborative with both sides of the aisle would be something that would be refreshing for a change.
People can disagree all they want. This is why we have elections. When I look back at what happened in November, the American people handed Republicans the presidency, they handed us the Senate, they handed us the House. And what we've been doing for the last 6 months since we were sworn in under the new administration is leading. We've been passing legislation. We've been actually getting good policy into law, not talking about what might this look like in theory or what would we do if we could do what we want. We've been actually legislating. We've been getting things done. And my belief is when the American people walk into the ballot box next year, they'll look at the rhetoric coming from Democrats, they'll look at their pocketbooks, and those two things will not match. And if they vote their pocketbooks, we're going to be fine downrange.
What happened to the middle ground, Rudy?
Well, you know, I think even for people like me, I mean, we do work across the aisle. I mean, there are a number of Democrats I have relationships with in Washington, D.C., and when we can find common ground, we absolutely do. What you see on TV is not actually the way it works in Washington, D.C. What I've seen in Washington, D.C. of people fighting, arguing, and yelling like the American people think it is, I see that actually very little in Washington, D.C. in the time that I spend there. Because if someone like me is talking about tax policy on TV and you got two people fighting and arguing, well, everyone's going to go to the people who are fighting and arguing because tax policy is boring. That's just the way that the human psychology works and what you see on TV. And so for me, I focus on putting my head down and fighting for the Hoosiers that I represent. And we're going to go to the American people, go to the Hoosiers next year, ask them to renew my 2-year contract, and they'll walk into the voting booth and make that decision. Well,
you are here in your district this week. Tell us where you're headed today.
So today we'll be here in St. Joe and Elkhart County, going to a number of different manufacturing interests. We'll be going to Sherwin-Williams over in Elkhart. We'll be meeting with ADEC, who of course helps a number of our disabled people in this county and over in Elkhart County. We'll also be meeting with a number of individual constituents who even called my office and said, hey, I'd like to have the opportunity to meet Rudy and share a few issues that I have. So we have a number of individual constituent meetings, as well as some manufacturing meetings and meeting with ADEC today.
Will you schedule a town hall anytime in the near future?
If I believe that a town hall could be productive, I would absolutely do that. What you see with town halls across this country is they're totally unproductive. You see people showing up, yelling at their member of Congress. Member of Congress can't get a word in edgewise. And so I don't know why people would do things that are completely unproductive. If I could have a productive conversation at a town hall, I would absolutely do that. But for me, I'm focused on having productive conversations, making sure that I can represent Indiana's 2nd District accurately in Washington, D.C., and fight for the Hoosiers that sent me there to do this job.
How about this? Will you be on TV with us more so that we can ask you more questions?
I don't know that I've ever turned down a live in-person interview with you.
There you go.
To my knowledge, I'm looking at my district director, Griffin Nate over here. He's nodding yes. To my knowledge, Tricia, I have accepted every single live TV interview request that you have ever asked. So if you ever want me on TV, I will come back tomorrow and the next day and the next day, as many times as you want, to be as accessible as you think that we should have.
I look forward to those conversations, and thank you so much for your time today.
You bet.
And safe travels to you.
Great. Thank you, Tricia.
All right, we'll be back with a check of weather right after this.